Is this man a zombie, one of the living dead? Do the witch doctors of Haiti know how to cheat death? Can they raise corpses from the grave? Can modern science at last expose the secrets of zombification? Mysteries from the files of Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001 and inventor of the communications satellite. Now in retreat in Sri Lanka, he ponders the riddles of this and other worlds.
The subject of this program comes straight from the horror movies. For decades, visitors to Haiti in the Caribbean have returned with unnerving tales of zombies, the living dead. Travelers tell of men and women who are apparently killed by some mysterious poison slipped into their food or drink by a voodoo witch doctor. But after the funeral, the witch doctor returns to the grave, usually at night, digs up the coffin, and revives his victim with another secret potion. This creates a zombie, a creature half dead and half alive, who can be sold as a slave to blindly do its master's bidding. Well, can we believe a word of this? Haiti is a dangerous and spooky place where the truth often lies hidden in dark mists of voodoo and superstition. So it's not surprising that doctors and scientists have been reluctant to investigate the zombie phenomenon. Yet, if there's any truth in it, there could be very important implications for modern medicine.
Voodoo possesses the hearts, minds and fears of all Haitians. Their ancestors brought this mesmerizing mix of religion and sorcery from Africa. In Haiti, death is truly in the midst of life. The graveyard dominates the capital, Port-au-Prince. Everything here speaks of the Haitians' worst fear, that their dead are not truly dead. An unlocked tomb is an invitation to the sorcerers. They steal skeletons, bones and skulls for voodoo potions, discarding the shattered coffins. But the padlocks are there to deny them the ultimate prize. Here perhaps is where the witch doctors find their zombies. Outside the capital, the people's fears are even greater. Father Jean-Philippe recognizes the power of voodoo and magic over his congregation.
People believe in two forces. They believe in God and they believe in magic. But to get a quicker response, they turn to magic.
One of his congregation, Sagesse Ariste, has an extraordinary confession to make. Her sister died strangely and suddenly. To prevent her being turned into a zombie, her family had to take the most horrifying precautions.
When you realized that your sister had died in an unnatural way, what did your family do to make sure she couldn't be raised from the dead?
People say that when you bury that kind of person, you have to cut them up, so they can't be raised from the dead, like they could be if the body was whole. They cut off her feet, her hands and her fingers. They chopped off her head and split it in two. And then they buried her with her head at her feet and her feet at her head. And when they did that, she couldn't be taken.
It's true, this thing about zombies. It's a reality that confronts you every day. Even if it's hard to believe, you have to accept it as a fact.
High in the remote hills above the church, an even more extraordinary story awaits. In this village lives Wilfred Dorisson, once an intelligent student, now thought to be a zombie. The villagers are convinced that he is the living dead, a body without a soul. Wilfred's loving family cares for him as best they can with the help of Haiti's leading doctors. He spends the day in stocks to keep him from coming to harm. His scars point to a past as a zombie enslaved in chains.
If you compare the way he was with what he's like now, that's not my boy at all. He's an empty shell. He's a ghost.
Wilfred's parents can't forget the day they heard their son had died.
When he started to get ill, his eyes went yellow.
Then he started to lose consciousness. He would shake his head. And then at other times he would start bellowing like a bull and thrashing about and throwing himself around.
After 7 or 8 days of sickness, he died. When we realized the body was smelling terrible, starting to rot, we decided to bury him right away. It was then we knew it wasn't a natural death. At that moment, I felt devastated. If I'd been able to, I would have preferred to die myself. I felt I'd lost all my life.
The coffin maker who prepared Wilfred's body was Renaud Février. He was shocked by its appearance. He had never seen anything like it.
The smell was awful, so we decided to put him in the coffin and bury him immediately.
Wilfred's body was hugely swollen.
The body was this wide and this high. I'd made a coffin, but it wasn't big enough, so I had to send for another, bigger coffin. But even then we had to tie it up with rope.
Wilfred's parents mourned their tragic loss. They were inconsolable. But 18 months later, the weekly village cockfight was dramatically interrupted. A dishevelled figure appeared. The spitting image of Wilfred stood before the crowd. His friend, Verdier Durazel, was amongst the astonished witnesses.
When Wilfred saw me, he recognized me, but he couldn't remember my name. I was amazed because I'd seen him dead and I'd gone to his funeral. And then to see him alive, I just couldn't understand it. It was a miracle.
The news that Wilfred had returned as a zombie spread like wildfire. Soon it reached the ears of his father.
I saw him, and it was him. I recognized marks on his body. I was afraid, but I didn't want to show this to my wife or anyone. I put on a brave face, even though I was dying in my heart.
When she saw his hand, Wilfred's mother knew it was her son.
I recognized him by his feet and also by this finger. When he was at school, he used to play football, and one day he broke his finger. Then when he returned, I recognized this finger and his feet, so I knew it was him.
The family set out to discover who could have turned Wilfred into a zombie. They suspected Wilfred's uncle, Bellevoix. He'd been involved in a bitter family land dispute. Bellevoix was arrested. He was brought to the provincial capital of Clarke to face trial. This unique case was heard by the chief of the criminal court, Judge Jacques Pierre. Haitian law takes zombification seriously. The penal code brands it a crime. It states that zombification should be treated like murder.
I have heard a lot about these cases, these zombies, these dead people who come back to life. Bellevoix d'Orisson confessed that he had killed Wilfrid d'Orisson with a powder. He was found guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment with forced labor.
Wilfrid's death certificate was used as evidence during the trial. Before his apparent death, he'd been doing well as a student in Clarke. By chance, Judge Pierre had a second job as principal of Wilfrid's college and knew him well.
I was amazed when I saw this young man was still alive. He had changed completely. He'd lost his memory. He could not speak. He couldn't understand anything at all. During the trial, Wilfrid d'Orisson was classified as a zombie. Scientifically speaking, defined as an individual raised from the dead and reduced to slavery by a sorcerer who's taken away his soul.
In this case, the Haitian state recognized Wilfrid as a true zombie, but far more often claims of zombification turn out to be false. In the 1930s, this woman was recognized by her astonished family as Felicia Felix Mentor. She had apparently died nearly 30 years earlier, but now she was alive. The case was investigated by government health officer and famous psychiatrist Dr. Louis Mars. The family told him they'd identified the woman from her limp. Felicia, who died, had been crippled by a broken leg.
I investigated about the broken leg because it was a focal point where something should be clear about what happened exactly. You see, X-ray was made and there was no trace of fracture. The leg was not broken.
Mars suspected the limp was caused by malnutrition.
She was well fed, and then she started to walk normally.
The real Felicia could never have walked normally. Mars realized this was an imposter, a mental patient.
A mental patient, but without a broken leg, no resurrection, a mental patient.
But other extraordinary cases are not so easily explained. Angelina Narcisse always brings 2 bunches of flowers when she visits the cemetery. She comes to mourn her dead brother Clairvius. She lays 1 bunch at the grave where Clairvius was finally interred in 1994. The other is for the tomb where he was buried more than 30 years earlier.
My brother was a zombie. The first time he died, I was really upset.
18 years later, he reappeared.
Someone told me that Clairvius was in the marketplace, so I went down there. A crowd had gathered. I went right into the middle of it, and there he was. That was a big shock. I was beside myself.
Clairvius Narcisse is also remembered by 2 retired missionaries, Joy and Eldon Auscherman. They spent a lifetime caring not only for the poor of Haiti, but also for its zombies.
Now there are the 2 zombies. Tifam, it's not the total picture, and Narcisse together. He was buried about a mile or 2 miles out of Leicester in a country cemetery. And it was quite a feeling standing there with him, looking down at his own grave. That was really something else. This is Narcisse and his wife, a dead man taking, illegally dead and everything, taking a wife, a bride, was quite an event in that area, and seemed rather strange to us, of course. He was a very kindly gentleman, very nice gentleman. We could sit by the hour and listen to him. He could keep you spellbound for an hour, 2 hours. He'd tell you all about everything. But while he was in the morgue, according to the story I heard him tell us, he was conscious. Yes, he's put in the coffin, and that's when he said he could feel that nail in his cheek. He was inside the box, and he said they'd driven a nail right in, and it was stuck in his cheek, but he couldn't move. And he could hear people talking, and he didn't You just couldn't move at all. And I think this must be the spot where the nail went in right there. He was pretty proud of that.
The man who hammered those nails into Clairvius's coffin was Antoine Veus, the morgue attendant at the hospital where Clairvius was certified dead.
After 18 years, everybody said he's raised. He's raised. Narcisse has come back to life. I said, no, it can't be true. But afterwards, he was brought to the hospital. When he arrived, I said, yes, that's him, the man who died. And he said, here's where you drove the nail into my cheek. When you were nailing down the coffin, this is where the nail hit me. It made me jump, he said. It was then I realized it was true, that he really was a zombie.
Clairvius claimed he could remember his death, burial and resurrection. Today, Wilfred Dorisson finds it hard to talk, but he was able to tell his story to his friend Verdieu when he first came back.
When he first came back, he could talk to people. I used to go around to his house to play dominoes. While we were playing, we used to chat. He told me that while he was dead, while he was in the coffin, he could hear everything. He told me that during the wake, he could hear his mother crying. He heard his father speaking while his coffin was being put in the tomb. His father said, "Go, my son. Go to God if God has taken you. But if an evildoer has done this, God will judge him." All of this really happened. I know because I was there too.
Haitians believe that the secrets of zombification are hidden in black magic temples. This is the temple of one of Haiti's most feared sorcerers, Altesse Paul. The witch doctors claim they work magic, but perhaps a practical knowledge of natural poisons lies behind their expertise. It's rumoured they have secret laboratories to prepare poisonous potions which fool families into burying their dead alive. Altesse Paul uses all kinds of plants and animals in his potions, but the exact ingredients are trade secrets. His most closely guarded formula is the recipe for making zombies.
This secret I can never give you. And the reason I can't give you this secret is because it's a huge secret which I share only with my voodoo brothers. If I have anything to do with zombies, I keep the secrets to myself. It's very dangerous to give them to you just like that. But if you were initiated, it would be my duty to give you the secrets, because you would be my legitimate child. That's the only way I can reveal the secrets.
But there's a catch. Anyone who has been initiated is forever sworn to secrecy. The witch doctors count on no one daring to break the oath of silence. This man was once a much feared voodoo sorcerer, but now he's a Christian evangelist. As Brother Dodo, he preaches against his old trade.
I used to make zombies. I regret it so much. Sometimes I can't help crying.
Brother Dodo can reveal how zombies are created.
The process is easy, even common. It makes people swell up. The main ingredient is crapaud la mer, the sea toad, or puffer fish. That's what you use. You make a powder out of it. You mix it with maximiate and with a lot of other powders. You put ashes, water bugs and earthworms in it. You must have crapaud la mer. All these ingredients you use to knock people out. When they take this pufferfish powder, they swell up like a barrel. The powder seeps through the pores of the skin and destroys the blood.
Could these revelations give a scientific explanation of the zombie phenomenon? Perhaps we can reconstruct the witch doctor's secret recipe. First into the mix, and apparently the most important of all, is this creature, a pufferfish. It's found in the tropical seas here off the coast of Sri Lanka and also in Haiti, where it's known as crapaud la mer, the sea toad. And I can see why it might come in useful for zombification, because the skin and innards of pufferfish contain a deadly nerve poison, 300 times more lethal than cyanide. Despite this, its flesh is prized as a delicacy in Japan. Every year, several unfortunate Japanese gourmets die after eating pufferfish that hasn't been properly prepared. Others, more fortunate, have appeared dead only to come round just before their funeral, telling amazed family and friends that they were conscious all the time.
Brother Dodo explains how the pufferfish poison works on the witch doctor's victims.
You don't die. If you were dead, I couldn't bring your physical body back. You hear everything that's going on around you. If your wife cries, you can hear her. If your husband cries, you hear him. If it's your children, you hear them. When you're brought to the morgue, you can hear the ambulance that takes you there. When you're put in the coffin, you're conscious. When they take you to the cemetery, you're conscious. When they close your grave, you're conscious. You're not really dead. Your heart still beats, but so low that no doctor's instruments can tell that you're still alive. It's an evil thing.
As part of the continuing medical care devoted to Wilfred Dorisson by the Haitian medical profession, neuropsychiatrist Dr. Roger Mallory plans to take Wilfred to Port-au-Prince. He pronounces his patient fit to travel. In the capital, he's arranged a brain scan for Wilfred. This may show if there's any damage. If there is, he'll try to pinpoint its cause. Was Wilfred starved of oxygen in his tomb, or could poison be responsible for his condition? At the only computerized brain scanner in Haiti, Wilfred is prepared for the investigation by radiologist Dr. Gina Joachim. For the first time, medical science can penetrate the brain of a man said to be a zombie. The doctors hope that the truth about Wilfred will be revealed when they analyse the results.
So here we have the brain scan of Wilfred. We didn't find any lesion of the cerebellum, but in the ventricular system we can see that there is some damage of the right frontal cone, which we find here and here.
Yes, Dr. Gina, I agree with you. I've often come across this sort of case. Shortage of oxygen could have been responsible for this kind of brain damage, although it's true we might have expected larger lesions. Nonetheless, the damage to the brain is consistent with him having suffered a lack of oxygen.
The doctors have found brain damage but can't yet establish its cause for certain. Perhaps Wilfred was starved of oxygen in his tomb, but other more natural reasons can't be ruled out. Investigations continue into this most extraordinary and poignant of all medical mysteries, the riddle of the zombies.
So, what can we believe? Perhaps the whole thing is a myth created by unscrupulous dictators to keep their people in check. Perhaps zombies are simply suffering from mental illness or brain damage. Or maybe a rare neurological syndrome is embroidered by folklore and superstition into something magical and sinister. Yet, I'm inclined to take some zombie stories seriously. If the voodoo witch doctor's potions really do work, scientists may be able to create powerful new drugs, particularly anesthetics and painkillers. Thus, out of evil may come forth good.